Again. I'm sorry we don't have more time, because I know that these conversations can be very helpful. You don't get a chance to talk to each other so often, but unfortunately, we have limited time today. So I want to move on to talk. Is it helpful to talk about culture and how to move it forward? Now, one of the things that I think is very important is keep in mind that you've got to have a vision, a shared vision with the staff of where you're trying to go, okay? And put the emphasis on shared. If it's not shared, you can't create a culture. The other thing to keep in mind is that cultures are rooted in customs and rituals and practices. So it's not simply what you believe, it's also what you do that reinforces the beliefs, right? And so you need to think about activities and ways of doing things that reinforce that vision and those core values of your school, okay? What I'd like to do now is to show a short video. Now, this is not about English language learners, but it's still relevant to Houston, about how a school goes about changing its culture and how that, in turn, starts to impact student achievement and the quality of teaching and learning in the school, okay? As you watch this, I want you to think about what the school is doing that results in this dramatic change, okay? What you could take away to learn from, all right?
Schools are critical in getting students prepared for college, academically. But in many communities, they must do more. They must help kids see themselves as college material. And they need to start early, long before junior or senior year. In this story, we look at the transformation of a middle school in the inner city of Atlanta. At the start of our story, the Parks School is only succeeding as daycare. There's not much education going on. These students have been written off. The idea of preparing them for college seems ludicrous. By the end of the story, this same school is a model of what a good school can and should be, where all students are seen as college material. 13-year-old Antonio Barnes dreams of a better life, but his chances of making it to college are bleak. He is poor, he has no adult supervision, his mother wrestles with problems of her own. He often has nowhere to live. Just making it to school is a challenge.
Some of our students might walk about 7 blocks to get here, and like 4 to 6 of those blocks are filled with prostitution, drug dealers, might be even stolen cars just sent along the way. That was a lot of obstacles to cross before you get to school.
Obstacles to learning are everywhere in these children's lives.
We have kids that come to school that have been displaced from their homes, so they have all kind of issues about where am I going to sleep today when I go home? And kids who come with the same clothes for a week, and we have kids who have vision problems, who need glasses, we have kids with dental problems and toothaches. We can go on down the list of all the social issues that kids come to our schools with.
Antonio's in the 8th grade at Parks Middle School. Like many inner city schools, it often reflects the pressures of the neighborhood outside.
The students would not learn, they would not go to class, they fought 6 or 7 times a day, they was all over the place, they were destroying the school.
Teachers couldn't handle the discipline problems and quit. Their replacements are often inexperienced and overwhelmed. Textbooks are scarce. The building is in disrepair. There is little expectation that any of these kids can or will ever learn much.
Boy, if you had more and more young, would you meddle broaden?
Antonio, like the majority of his classmates, is a poor reader. In fact, he's reading at least 2 grades below what's considered normal.
Hadramit, Andromit, and make enough plants for all of them.
And his teachers and everyone else seem to accept that. They see it as unfortunate, but just the way it is.
I think some of the biggest misconceptions that society or people have about these kids is that they're dumb, they don't know, they can't do, they're stupid. Because they're black, because they're poor, because their parents are who they are, because they live where they live, that they can't do.
Too many parents, teachers, and even whole communities buy into this argument, believing no one can teach kids like these.
And whenever you hear those arguments being made, the net result is that the educators no longer believe that it's their responsibility to alter the outcomes. That is, if you believe that the solution or the cause lies elsewhere, then what you do is you render yourself irrelevant to the solution. And I would add there that it's not merely what schools do, it's also what communities do. That is, there is a prevailing belief that the reason why some kids don't succeed in school is because they're either not smart enough or they don't try hard enough. What we don't acknowledge is the fact that many of those kids have not had an education that would have prepared them to do well. That is, before we are ready to write kids off as expendable, we need to be really sure that they have been given the opportunity to excel academically.
Antonio has never had that chance. Kids who are going to college are already on the path by middle school, taking the right courses and getting the right grades. Children from low-income families, like Antonio, who aren't on the path to college, will probably never get on.
So in an upper middle class family, if we see that a young person at any age is really having trouble academically, mom and dad move into gear, and even if it requires hiring a private tutor or getting into an after-school academic program, that will happen. Young people in low-income communities, especially in communities of color, rarely have access to those kinds of things.
Without those resources, the consequences are clear. Poor urban minority kids across the country, by 8th grade, are already 3 grades behind middle-class students and losing more ground every day. Failing every day is tough on the kids, and many drop out as soon as they can. More than half of these kids won't make it to high school graduation. Parks is doing such a bad job, the Atlanta School Board is on the verge of closing the school and shipping the kids elsewhere. At the last minute, they vote to keep the kids where they are, but change everything else about the school.
Changing school culture is difficult. It's difficult because it involves changing attitudes, changing behavior, particularly of adults, but eventually of kids and of their parents. It requires a lot of intervention, it requires a lot of work and a lot of time, but right now we need to put much more emphasis on that than we do on changing curriculum or changing school organization. Not to say that those things aren't important, but those things are insufficient for producing the change in culture. And I would say that if you had to weigh the two, changing the culture will get you far more results than changing organization and curriculum.
Over the course of the summer, Parks Middle School gets a complete makeover.